Welcome back to Beyond the Wire podcast. I'm your host, Tim Keller. Along with me, as he always is Mr. Matt Disher. How are you today, sir?
It's another beautiful day. Another day on the right side of the grass, as my dad says.
It has been a dreary week here in Pennsylvania. It hasn't necessarily officially rained hard. We haven't had too many rainstorms. It's just kind of been gray and cloudy and misty all week long so far. So not a whole lot of sun out here, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I will say, my oldest is getting ready to go to homecoming this year. Her and one of her girlfriends, they're going to, go go together. And, I'm thinking about possibly getting my clearances, standing in the court. They're actually doing it outdoors because of COVID. They're doing it on the football field.
Oh, yeah.
So it's either I'm going to get my clearances. I had my clearances at one point, to help out with field trips and things of that nature. I'd like to get those back, maybe stand in the corner and just stare directly in her direction and wait till a sad little young man tries to approach her to ask her to dance. We actually did some role playing the other day. I played the 16, 17-year-old young boy saying, "You look real nice. Do you want to dance?" I said, "What do you say to that?" And she goes, I don't know. I can't dance. I go, "Great answer. Great answer. I love it. I love it." There's also a hill overlooking the football field. I thought about possibly, we talked about when we made our own ghillie suits years ago.
Yeah.
Making a new ghillie suit, just parking myself right up on top of that hill. And I'm not taking a weapon on school grounds, but a laser pointer.
Right.
And every time a boy gets close, just put that laser right there. Yes.
Just blend in. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah,
I mean, it won't scar any people for life or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think that's completely reasonable.
Yeah.
And we can always reference this back to the military. That's called helicopter parenting.
There it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've got a picture somewhere. My wife and I like to take pictures of us when we're dressed up, when we do the awkward prom photo, where we pretend like we're two young kids who are trying to hold each other in a photo, but we're at arm's length and we've got the fake smiles on our faces. And so whenever there's I often pose for pictures like that, like the forced,
the forced pose and smile. Yes.
I look completely awkward. And I'm, as you're talking, I was trying to find one of those real quick because I thought it'd be funny to share it. But
yeah, you do post them from time to time. And speaking of your wife, I wanted to say happy birthday to Mrs. Disher. I don't know how old she is. I'm going to guess 25.
Let's call it 25, 21.
Right. There you go, Mrs. Disher. You're 25.
You can't lose there.
You can't go wrong with 25.
25 if you round up.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right.
100% right. Absolutely.
She had a good birthday. It wasn't one of those milestones, but I took her out to dinner. I took her out to dinner with her family. I got her, in typical fashion. She's impossible to shop for because she just likes shoes and clothes and doesn't really care to have anything else.
Okay.
And so all the clothes and shoes she already has. And so I have to just basically ask her to populate a shopping list on a website like Amazon. Just populate it for things, and then I'll buy it and wrap them.
Yeah.
And then you can act surprised.
I will do a similar thing. The wife sent her mother and I in a group text. Here are some ideas for my birthday. My wife just had her birthday on the 1st of October. So very similar thing. I did take the liberty of going a little off course. I took 2 shots in the dark here. Not completely in the dark, but I took 2 shots. She was very happy with both of those as well. So good birthday. She actually went away this past weekend. And despite her strong beliefs that something bad would happen, the house is still standing and is not burnt down. No children have perished. And I'm still alive. So it was
right.
Overall, good success.
Yeah.
Good success.
That's always good. As long as there's no screaming or long-term expensive effects or missing children. I mean,
all the children are accounted for. The house is still standing. As far as I know, there's no need for any long-term, grief counseling or anything like that. Nothing bad happened. So it's
wait till after the homecoming dance.
That might lead to some counseling. Yeah. Some trauma counseling and things like that. No.
But you're just making sure everything's going to be okay.
That's
all it is.
It's tough for me because I was I'll say not very intelligent young man.
I always thought you were intelligent.
I had my moments, but overall I made a lot of off the cuff decisions. And I know how teenage boys are,
Right.
because I once was there, and that's my concern.
100%. And I
know?
think, this is the thing, and I don't have I'm not a father to a girl, but I do think a piece of this is, and this is probably the way that my parents raised my sister, for example, or that you're probably raising your daughter. That's like, make the right choices, understand people's motives, because you're absolutely right. And it's not bad or good. It's not that teenage boys are always out for the wrong things. It is that's kind of their motivation in life. For a handful of years, teenagers in general are interested in one or two things.
Yep, they are driven by very specific hormones.
Right. And it's not ill will necessarily. Now some of them will act ill, but most, it's just, that's the way it goes, and it's frowned upon in society because of the the consequences, I guess, the permanent consequences of thereafter.
Yeah.
But
she's a beautiful girl, smart girl too, and I trust her to make the right decision. So I won't be in a ghillie suit, at least on the school property.
Right. You just wear the big nose with the mustache and the glasses.
They'll never know. Yeah, she'll never guess
around.
it to me. She'll never guess it to me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's get into some of the news. We pulled a couple articles up here from military.com. As we like to do, we like to talk about some of the things that are going on and things that these websites like to highlight for us. And the first one we pulled up today is an article talking about a senior cybersecurity official at the Pentagon has quit, stating that he thought it was impossible for the U.S. to compete with China on AI, artificial intelligence. So Nicholas, I'm gonna take a shot at this last name, Chaillan, Chaillan.
Nailed it.
He joined the Air Force as its first chief software officer in August of 2018. He worked to equip it and the Pentagon with the most secure and advanced software available. When this gentleman resigned from his position back on September 2nd, in his departing LinkedIn post, he cited the Pentagon's reluctance to make cybersecurity and AI a priority as his reason for his resignation. So it sounds like, this guy was, kind of focused on one specific lane that he wanted all this attention paid to. It sounds like maybe some people that were decision makers and decided where money was allocated weren't necessarily throwing the funds and things his way, and whatever team he was working with, and he became too frustrated. And so he's now resigned from that position. Hopefully we have some other individuals out there looking for positions like this that would do a good job. When you read into this article, he says, we have no competing fighting chance against China in 15 to 20 years. He said, as of right now, he thinks it's already done deal. It's over in his opinion. It's actually kind of an interesting article. We've spoke before about how wars of the future most likely won't be on a battlefield. We've seen war strategy progress over time. I mean, no more are people lining up in the middle of a wide open field and having cannon fodder be shot at them. You're not stuffing your bayonets or your rifles and attaching your bayonets. It's not fought like that anymore. Guerrilla warfare really kind of took over around the Vietnam era, Korea War era, and now you have these latest battles where you're dealing with cities and having to clear buildings and things of that nature. And I think that this sort of AI and the cybersecurity is really where the next step is going.
When you think about cybersecurity, you can cripple a country, you can cripple a business, you can cripple a defense network. This is not far off. I know we've joked around before about drones and robot dogs, and we could go back to some of those episodes that we've previously done. And the implication or the reference was always back to like Terminator 2 or Terminator, the Terminator series, where there's the wars are fought by machines, and sometimes they look like humans. But I wouldn't go to that length. I think that there's always going to be a place for conventional warfare or specialized warfare, the special operations groups, and that's how combat has evolved since 200 years ago. Is now you don't need 100,000 troops on the ground to fight a battle. You need a well-trained team of 6 or 8 or 10, and maybe some armor, maybe some aircraft. Some air cover is always essential. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's never going to go away. However, if you are simply trying to beat economically or militarily, you're trying to beat another organization, it's a very sound idea to be able to cripple their defense network, to be able to cripple their computers, to be able to render them useless. If you think about everything that's connected, what if somebody could break into an aircraft or a tank or the communication system therein? I heard this thing a couple of years ago that cars are so well connected by satellites that you could essentially hack into a satellite system and disable somebody's Chevy Suburban or Ford F-150 driving down the highway, or you could cause them to steer into a ditch because everything is computerized. The same reference can be made for military operations. You do show up to the battlefield and suddenly your tanks won't fire because some patch in the system doesn't work.
The laser guiding on the targeting system,
right,
or something like that. Yeah.
But I think even beyond that, it's we saw what happened during the COVID pandemic. In the very beginning, we started crippling ourselves with policy. It was everything shut down and people were losing their businesses and going into financial ruin, et cetera. Imagine that on a large scale. Imagine if suddenly people couldn't buy anything anymore because somebody broke into Amazon. Mm-hmm. Or somebody shut off the pipeline, the oil pipeline a few months back.
That was
hacking. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. There are probably some other things in reference to this gentleman's departure and his warning, basically, that are much larger than what the common 26-year-old man in the United States can see or view. But that should be exceptionally concerning that on the world stage, we're always pointing fingers at China, and they're pointing fingers back. We do a ton of business together, but they could financially cripple us, or Absolutely. Anybody could financially cripple us if we don't button up our cybersecurity.
Absolutely. The article does say that China is aiming to become the leading AI superpower by 2030. So less than 10 years away, China plans to be the leader in the world in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. And on the backside of cybersecurity becomes the hacking side. So if you have these individuals that are so versed in keeping their things secure, they're also extremely well versed in messing with other people's things as well. The article goes on to say, I am just tired of continuously chasing support and money to do my job. My office still has no billet and no funding for this year or the next. It just sounds like, this is this man's life, and these are his biggest concerns, and he's not getting the support that he wanted. So he felt it's better to walk away now. Hopefully he can find success elsewhere.
Yeah, he will.
And
some company's going to pay him a fairly large sum to do what he was doing. That's Absolutely. Probably not a concern for him. But I think that this is, back to it. We talk about AI. AI is everything from the weapon systems and the aircraft and all the stuff that thinks for itself effectively. And I'm dumbing this down. I'm oversimplifying this, but it's all the things that think for themselves and make adjustments by themselves. But a lot of this is things like how it tracks behavior via your social media and internet usage and where you are. This is the same thing as like when I'm at my mom's house and my phone starts feeding me ads to things that I don't need, but perhaps they're things that my mom buys a lot. And now it has made this reference to, it's going to follow me around because, your mom is buying this. So you were at your mom's house, perhaps you'll buy it for her.
Yeah.
It's retargeting. It's geofence targeting and retargeting, but it's AI. It's a system that learns based on where you are and what you do, what you buy, your behaviors.
And your geographic location. Like here, for instance, living on the East Coast, there is no in and out anywhere near me. If I were to hop on a plane, travel to the West Coast, the Southwest, somewhere in that area, I could possibly be scrolling through Facebook or another social media platform, and all of a sudden I'm going to see ads for In and Out, which I don't think I've ever seen an ad on social media personally for In and Out. And how's that happen? You're in that geographic location. Right. The system knows it. It feeds it back to these algorithms. The algorithms are like, these are the ads we spit out to those individuals.
It's geofence targeting. I do a lot of that in my day job. feeding ads via social media and internet ads and even YouTube ads. So now when people on military installations are watching videos of kittens and people falling down the stairs or whatever you watch on YouTube, my ad is the annoying 15-second ad that shows up in the beginning that you can't skip past. And I have hundreds of thousands of views on these in 3 months because I'm targeting that population. It's military specific. But then when that person clicks into that, there's another algorithm in there that tells them like, well, this person might be military. So now I'm going to try to sell them. Based on the behaviors of others, I'm going to try to sell them something that might be interesting to the military. Military.com, for example, which we use for all of our news. And I advertise with military.com as well. Military.com might also pay to be geo-targeted or geo-fenced, or to have retargeting on people who are looking at those ads. They've made the assumption, the internet's algorithm, lasers. The internet's algorithm has made the decision that this person fits into this category. And there's a lot of information that they've collected via social media. Like you have an entire profile on you within social media, like Facebook. They can make determinations on how you lean politically, obviously religiously, where you live, who you'd probably vote for. That's where a lot of those poll numbers come from. It's not from necessarily people showing up and checking a box. It's because it's called, a couple of years back, they called it big data. And there were commercials like, how do you calculate big data? Well, that's big data. How do you collect the information of hundreds of millions of people and then serve them ads? Because on a global scale, now you're able to potentially sell $1 billion more worth of stuff. That talk about Jeff Bezos and his bank account right now. Part of that is it's not only because he had the right product or service in the right time, but it's also how they continue to market the right items. When I'm buying a pair of shorts on Amazon, and then it's like, hey, you know what? You might actually need this Toyota TRD keychain for your new Toyota 4Runner TRD off-road. Oh yeah, you know what? I do need that thing for $12.
Because it remembered 6 months ago you bought a rubber matting, for the floors or something.
Yeah,
leather.
That's exactly
mats.
it.
And it's like, oh well, he bought mats for this specific vehicle,
right?
Or at least this make of vehicle. Let's throw him stuff for these things.
And a lot of that data is sold too. So they collect that data and then they sell it to other people who want to buy it. And it's the same reason why right now I'm getting 3 text messages a day from different political people who are running for office in my community. I'm like, I don't even know who you are. Now I do, because I got your text message. But the spammers are buying it too. Anyway, all of this to say, I realize we got way off the topic of this gentleman at the Pentagon talking about cybersecurity and AI. We're way behind there, but I'd venture to say he will be fine in his career.
Oh yeah.
But what's more concerning in the long or short term is that we're unprepared. Perhaps we need to reevaluate the Pentagon. And I am one of the biggest critics of how we operate militarily. Perhaps the Pentagon should reevaluate its priorities, and we don't necessarily need a 1.8 million person military force when we could drop that down to 1.2 million and then spend a couple $100 billion on really building the walls around cybersecurity and AI.
Absolutely. The article also mentions that Google was working with the Pentagon a few years back on AI that would make drone strikes that much more accurate. And let's be honest, the individuals, the smart folks that work at Google aren't necessarily, the red, white, and blue Star Spangled Banner types all the time. And so some of those individuals had disagreements with the work they were doing, and 12 individuals from Google ended up walking away from their jobs as well. So, Matt, you brought up the whole social media thing. If anybody's interested in that, I think it was Netflix has a documentary called The Social Dilemma.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of former high-level employees of essentially all the major social media networks talking about how, they got into these fields thinking, we're connecting people, we're building relationships, we're keeping people in touch that, otherwise would never have been, able to keep in communication in years past. And there is a definite positive side to social media, but then it talks about some of the darker things, involved with social media as well. So,
right. And it talks about how it's designed to develop to give you that chemical reaction in your brain. Yeah, you're like, okay, this is, I'm being rewarded. And then people are okay to go in there and post all their personal information and where they are and when they were there, and that's all data that's being collected. There's a recently, and I don't have a whole lot of information on this, but I have seen some conspiracies around the whistleblower, the Facebook whistleblower. A woman came forward and said that there's a certain lack of censorship for some things and not censorship for other things, which I think we could all argue is true.
Yes,
If you're an avid enough social media user, certain things get brushed under the rug, but certain other things don't. Some of the conspiracies are that Facebook perhaps developed their own whistleblower to come out and say, we're not censoring enough, or we don't have access to people's stuff enough. We need more access. So it's almost like planting the mole to go out and say, hey, we need to change this. And everybody's like, yeah, change that. And then the companies start taking a little bit more. So it's kind of interesting to watch some of this stuff unfold. As with everything else, I'm always kind of like, whatever you're seeing in the media, what is the distraction? What else is happening?
Like you're trying to pull out, the half truths out of these articles and try to feed through the rest of it.
Yep.
The next article we pulled up, not necessarily a fun topic at all. Recently, the U.S. Navy has recovered the remains of 5 sailors and a MH-60S Seahawk off the Southern California coast. On Tuesday, the helicopter crashed off the deck of an aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, on August 31st. In a statement released Tuesday, the service said they recovered the lost aircraft October 8th from a depth of about 5,300 feet with the help of a salvage and dive team. The helicopter had landed on the aircraft when it started to experience side-to-side vibrations. This caused the main rotor to strike the flight deck and then fell off the side of the ship. One individual was rescued that day. 5 others went down with the helicopter, as well as 5 other individuals being injured who were working on the flight deck. So the aircraft's been recovered. The aircraft's in California. The remains that were found in the helicopter have been sent to Dover Air Force Base in Dover, Delaware, for identification purposes. The 5 individuals that passed away that day: Lieutenant Bradley Foster, he was 29 years old, from Oakhurst, California. Lieutenant Paul Fridley, 28, from Annandale, Virginia. He was the Naval Air Crewman, second class. James Burrick, he was 31, from Salem, Virginia. A hospital corpsman, second class. Sarah Burns, 31, from Severna Park, Maryland, and a hospital corpsman, third class. Bailey J. Tucker, 21, from St. Louis, Missouri. So rest in peace to these 5 individuals here. Sadly, out there training, out there just doing your everyday job, and sometimes things go the wrong way. Also in this article, it does talk that this incident was one of 12 Class A mishaps that have happened this year. A Class A mishap, if you do not know, is a severe type of incident, one that causes a fatality, which is when, meets those criteria, permanent total disability, more than $2.5 million in damages, or destroys an aircraft. So it destroyed the aircraft. There were casualties, and I don't know how much a helicopter cost, but 2.5 is probably in that range, possibly. Yep. Rest in peace to those 5 individuals, and our thoughts are with their families.
Yeah, this is a conversation I've had with so many parents who are like, well, my son wants to join the military, my daughter wants to go in the whatever branch, and of course during the major insertions into Iraq and Afghanistan, people were concerned, is it safe or not? And my answer always was, you're probably safer, you're probably better off going in the military statistically than going to college and having a few too many drinks and getting into an accident one night. But I think that people forget quite often that during military service, there are inherently dangerous things. And I'm not saying that riding in a helicopter is inherently dangerous, because you can ride in a helicopter. I mean, we use helicopters around here to transport goods and to pick up medical patients who have been in horrible accidents and they need to get to the hospital really fast. But when you're talking about ships taking off and landing, helicopters taking off and landing from ships, rocking in the ocean, these things are exposed to extreme stress. These pilots are arguably, and the mechanics that work on them are arguably, some of the best in the world. But you got to remember that this is not like the air care helicopter down the street at the hospital is not running missions for 12, 15, 30 hours straight. It's not constantly taking off and landing and taking off and landing. And a lot of these pilots and their crews are doing that type of work all day long. And thusly, just like driving a car, the more you drive, the more chances you have of getting into an accident. Unfortunately, with a helicopter accident, it's fairly final, depending on the circumstances. Mm-hmm. But it is no less, just because we're not in conflict anymore, we're not massively in conflict anymore. We still have people in Iraq and Afghanistan. Don't doubt it, or other places. But the training operations, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was feet away from an explosion, mm-hmm. or somebody shooting over my shoulder or shooting over my head. There was one range I distinctly remember where I thought somebody behind me, or I thought there was somebody behind me shooting right over my head because rounds were impacting not inches from my face. And as it turns out, there were rounds ricocheting off of things and landing right in front of my face. But had one of those been another 6 inches toward me, I was wearing a boonie cover. I wasn't wearing a hard cover. Mm-hmm. It potentially could have gone right into my face or right into my head or something along those lines. I've flown on tons of helicopters. We mm-hmm. were next to the explosions. We were dropping out of boats in the back of ships 25 miles off the coast of a beach. All that stuff can turn into chaotic situations at any moment. And I think we shouldn't forget that these men and women, if you look at this, actually, I'm surprised that some of their ages are a little bit older than I would have expected.
Yeah.
29, 28, 31, and then a 21-year-old, a 31-year-old.
Yeah.
Generally, when you hear about mishaps in the military, it's a helicopter or a vehicle full of 23, 24, 25-year-olds.
Realistically, I think, there's the 21-year-old. The next 2 youngest individuals on that helicopter were the pilots themselves, the lieutenants. Right. So, probably relatively new to the fleet themselves.
Yeah.
And
these are potentially people who have kids at home. Mm-hmm. Based on their ages, if they went in the military, if they're, these are officers who are in the military at 28 to 31 years old, probably went in when they were after college, 22, 23 years old. Mm-hmm. So they probably have families back home. So it's one of those things. We talk about it. We see it in the news. It's another statistic, but at the same time, we have to remember that these are people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And although we're not in conflict, in massive conflict like we have been for the last 20 years, at the moment, there's still a very real risk, and there's still very real things happening to these men and women that cause injuries and even death in some cases. It's inherently a little bit more dangerous than your day-to-day life.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Our next article, and this is one that, has kind of been well known for a while, but the article is talking about a study that's being done with results to come out towards the end of this month that might help change some things for these individuals. So veteran medics and corpsmen are fighting for civilian recognition of their military training. So, I can't talk for an Army medic or an Air Force medic, but I can talk for the Navy docs. Every one of my experiences with a naval doc was always great. I'd say that most of them had better bedside manner than civilian doctors I've dealt with outside of the service. I think a lot of it was because when you were a Navy doc embedded with a unit of Marines, they were out there doing a lot of the same things we were. So they had that empathy. They knew exactly what we were doing and what we were going through. They were with mm-hmm. us there every step of the way. Where if, you're civilian Tim and, you go to the doctor and say, hey, I think I need, prescription ABC. This is what happened. They weren't there. They don't know for certain what actually happened. And there's protocols for them to follow. But, these people are highly trained in field medicine, as well as most of them being very well versed in traditional types of medicine.
Right.
And so back when the coronavirus pandemic began, a call was put out asking, the Army put out a call asking for volunteers from former medical personnel that worked in the armed forces. That first week alone, they had over 20,000 volunteers, mm-hmm. And they were turned away by the civilian sector, from hospitals, from urgent cares, things of that nature. And really, this was in a time, it still is in a time where more than ever, we need medical personnel. So I found this to be just an interesting article to read, talk about some of the struggles that these individuals have and how state to state, the rules are different. So there are about 6 to 8 states, I want to say right now, that will just say, yes, we'll take your naval or your military training and give you credits towards your, your EMT training or whatever it is. versus some states won't accept absolutely anything from the military, and you have to just essentially start from scratch. And I would imagine for some of those individuals that went through this military training, that's extremely disheartening. You spend all that time learning these things, and now you're going to have to sit in a class, pay for this class, and literally be bored out of your mind, because everything they're going to teach you for the first 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, you've already done. Not only have you learned this before, you've probably practiced it in real life.
In real situations, in real practical application.
Yes. And now you have somebody that possibly has never done any of these things they're actually teaching, standing in front of this classroom, and you're like, oh, I'm losing my mind back here. So for that simple fact alone, I would really like to see this report come out with some statistics that would help push.
Easy for you to say.
Absolutely. Get some of this information out there to the U.S. government. And, we talked about it last week. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. So if they can get some hard data and show like, hey, these individuals, and Matt, you talk about it all the time, these individuals that are in the service, that are coming out as veterans, looking to transition, are some of the smartest, brightest, most talented individuals out there available for the workforce. And that does not, disinclude these individuals that were in the medical fields. It absolutely includes these people, and they need to be given this shot. They're training their real world practice of these things. They should be given some sort of credit for. Absolutely.
You've got people for the last 20 years, and I'll use some examples here in a second, but I know I have been given IVs. A corpsman taught me how to do an IV on myself, so I had to do that. I have watched corpsmen. So just for reference, if anybody's listening who doesn't know what a corpsman is, it's the Navy's version of what the Army calls a medic. Mm-hmm. The Marine Corps doesn't have our own medical personnel, so we have the Navy's medical personnel, and they are called corpsmen. And a hospital corpsman is a person who works in a hospital, or they get assigned to wear our uniform and hump the pack just like we do, and they come along with us, and they're right beside us in combat, and they carry a backpack, and they have to essentially operate out of a backpack full of medical equipment. And I've seen and heard of people, these corpsmen and medics, putting people back together, quite literally, people who have been shot or blown up or severely injured otherwise, or fallen down and broken some bones, or whatever it is, you name it. And they put them back together and stabilize them with the equipment in a backpack. They don't have an ambulance. You got to bear in mind, like if you're in a field in Afghanistan, 100 miles away from any FOB, from any forward operating base or any medical facility, any hard-covered medical facility, you have what you have right there on the side of the road. There's not an ambulance full of oxygen and equipment. There's not, it takes a helicopter a number of minutes, potentially, depending on how available they are, an hour or two or more to get a medevac. There were some stories of medevacs not being able to land because they're still in the middle of a gunfight. In fact, there was a gentleman who won a Medal of Honor for marshaling some of those wounded people to the medevac area under fire, and this was in Afghanistan. At any rate, these are 21, 22-year-olds, 28-year-olds working out of a backpack, putting their comrades back together with whatever they've got in that backpack. And then imagine this: you come out of the military and you're like, well, I'd really like to learn how to work in a hospital ER, or I'd like to work as an EMT or a paramedic. And they're like, thanks, but no thanks, because you don't have the qualifications or certifications. Now, this is the thing. I understand certifications, especially in the medical field. There are too many things that could go wrong. Mm-hmm. However, I think probably the answer, if I had to oversimplify it again, would be that there's probably a universal training that they all receive, and they receive some sort of certification for those items based on maybe whichever states offer the most uniform standards. And that's probably how they go about doing it. I have a story, though. I was at a party next to the beach when I was in the Marines at Camp Pendleton, and two of the guys in my platoon were messing around. They had a couple of drinks, and the one guy basically took the legs out from underneath the other guy, and he fell down and hit his head hard, and he was bleeding all over the place. And he had essentially split the back of his head open. And we called 911 because we're not in uniform. We don't have corpsman. Corpsman was there. Corpsman didn't have his gear. EMTs show up, and I'm not kidding. So the corpsman was doing something else, and when the EMT showed up, one of the EMTs, and I don't mean to badmouth or bash anybody in the first responder. I have the utmost respect for first responders. This one particular incident, this EMT did not know. She seemed very clumsy. She didn't seem like she knew what she was supposed to do. She seemed a little bit freaked out by the fact that this guy was bleeding all over the place. But then she didn't know how to put a neck brace on. And I have no formal medical training other than what we learned in the Marines and other than what I had to learn alongside of a corpsman. I had to put the neck brace on our guy. And then I had to apply pressure to his wound on the back of his head. And, while they got everything else ready. But I was kind of thinking to myself, like, man, had I had a 25-year-old corpsman here or medic with some combat experience, they were probably better qualified than these EMTs that showed up to help us. It was just kind of a very strange situation, as I recall.
Yeah. So this article talks about the study is being done by a group called the Call of Duty Endowment. So they're actually going to publish their paper and their findings at the end of October 2021. The findings will not only include a state-by-state barriers to entry for military medical veterans, it will also grade the states on those barriers and correlate that information to the state's individual demand for medical personnel. So I'll just use my state as reference. So let's say, I don't know this for a fact, but let's say Pennsylvania is one of these states that are very strict on the barriers of entry for an individual getting out of the military with medical background, essentially saying anything you've ever done does not matter one bit. You're going to have to start over. If this is what you feel your calling is to help people in the medical field, you got to start, from scratch. And then it would then look at that state, in this case, Pennsylvania, and say, well, Pennsylvania is, lacking about 3,300, medical personnel right now.
Yeah.
Imagine if you loosen these reins a little bit and started getting these individuals out there. The idea is to inform state governments, some of which aren't even aware their rules are a hindrance to veteran hiring, and pressure them to make the right changes. I talked about those 20,000 volunteers in that first week during the beginning of the pandemic. I do know that the Army used some of those individuals to supplement their active duty personnel while those active duty personnel went out and set up triages and testing facilities early on in the process.
Yep.
So at least those the brave men and women that had now moved on from their service were willing and able to step up and say, hey, I still have this training. It's that knowledge is still stuck up here in my cranium. I'll put it to use again in any way, shape, or form. So I'd really like to see what this study comes out with, and I hope that some positive changes come because of it. Because the reality is, you would think like not the Attorney General, but the Surgeon General could possibly put together a team of well-respected doctors or medical professionals that could look at some of the military's training for these medics, for these corpsmen, and say, well, these things closely relate to EMT training. So if you went through these courses in the military, you should be able to come out of the military and be a certified EMT, or at least have 20 credits towards your RN practice, or 10 credits towards a surgeon's PhD, something like that, which I think would be a great thing for these individuals.
There's been a shortage of medical personnel in America for years now, and it just gets worse and worse. And I'm betting with vaccine mandates right now, a lot of healthcare workers are going to resign and walk away and go do something else. I've also talked to, because I'm in this business, I talked to a lot of people leaving the military, a lot of medical personnel, corpsmen, medics. Even I spoke with a dentist. She was an officer aiming to get out of the field and come out of the military and do something completely different. And this is a dentist, somebody who was a doctor of dental surgery. And she's like, I'm getting out and I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to do dental work anymore. Not that now hers will translate very easily. She could go be a dentist in the United States. But I talk to corpsmen and medics all the time who are like, I want to go into sales, or I want to go into whatever. And it's not because I always ask them, like, well, why the transition? And they're like, I thought I would enjoy this, or I did enjoy this, or I realized that I want to take a different career path. But a lot of times it's like, because I have to get out and then go back and do all the training over again.
It'd be like, Matt, whatever your first car was, you learned to drive that car, you got your license, you drove that car around for 3-4 years, whatever it is. You buy another vehicle. It'd be like them saying, oh, you got a new vehicle, you got to go back and retake your driver's license. Like, no, I can do this stuff. I've done it for 3-4 years now. Why do I have to go get retested?
The thing is, the labor unions have figured this out. Like the construction unions and the electricians unions and pipe fitters and stuff. They figure, well, they are figuring this out. To give them some credit, there might be some things that they're still trying to figure out, but they're utilizing the skill bridge program that we talk about all the time, and they have these amazing skill bridge programs to take people who have almost no experience. Like you could be the infantry person who's like, I don't know how to build anything, and bring them into a construction union and put them through the training and put them on the job making whatever these people are making now. They're starting out at absurd amounts of money because there's such a shortage for people. You'd think that there might be to use the term loosely, like a medical union, a group of people who are like, man, we could fill the 1 million shortage of nurses and healthcare workers by just unifying these people coming out of the military and paying them a decent wage. Think about the E5 coming out of the Navy, who's a corpsman, or the E6 coming out of the Navy, who's a corpsman. Is it a petty officer first class, HM1?
Something like it, yeah.
Yeah, they're coming out and they've got years. They got
10
years
of
of experience, right? And then you could just fast track them through a program and pay them $75,000 a year to start. I mean, these medical professionals, like the practitioners and things like that, they're making really good money. There's a lot of money to be made in there, and I feel like they could probably very easily button this up, and it shouldn't have taken this long. This is a conversation we've been having for many years.
Absolutely.
By the way, the Call of Duty Endowment is related to Call of Duty, the video game. So I always like to think if I'm playing video games, I might be supporting this organization.
Out,
I'm doing my part to
have you ever actually played that game?
All the Call of Duties I played. The most recent one, I don't have time for video games like I used to.
I agree.
And now my son is always on the Xbox, and so even when I do have a few minutes, he and his friends are playing. But the last one they did was pretty good, and I cannot remember the name of it. Maybe it was a Black Ops 2 or something.
I along the same lines. I just haven't had time to get into video games, and so as the systems have grown and gotten better, I've just kind of fallen out of that world. Yeah. But I know years ago, as the Call of Duty franchise was really becoming popular, it was like the second or third version where you could start playing online with all your friends. Everybody's got the headset on and they're they're talking their trash as they're playing the game. I was over at my sister's house, so my brother-in-law was playing with a bunch of his buddies, and I knew a bunch of them as well. So he said, "Why don't you sit down and play this? Play out with us." And so I sat down and never played it before, so I was just absolutely getting killed every 10 to 30 seconds. I felt like 30 seconds was probably the longest streak I had of staying alive. And so all these guys, talking all this trash, and I got to the point where I'm like, hey, if you guys want to get some paintball guns and go out into the woods and do this for real, we'll see who's still talking trash later. Yeah. But that's just
there was a commercial for, there used to be a video game called SOCOM. I think that was SOCOM. This is before the Call of Duty franchise came about and got really big, and before the Battlefield franchise and all that. But SOCOM was the PlayStation 2 version or PlayStation 1 version of the combat games. There was the Tom Clancy games too.
Yeah.
But I distinctly remember it. I think it was SOCOM. They had a commercial where these dudes were playing video games in like their dorm room or whatever, or they were high schoolers and they're sitting around playing, and they just kept getting killed. And every time they tried to execute a mission, they would just get stomped by somebody else. And then at the end of the video, it's this couch, and you see these Navy SEALs sitting there on the couch playing video games. They're like, these guys didn't even see it coming. But it was kind of funny because it was like actual Navy SEALs playing video games, which I always have to explain to my son. I'm like, these video games are not the same as real life, although they seem hyper realistic. Like the recent Call of Duty, there's a point in the game where you're in a building with your night vision goggles on, and it looks so crispy and clear that it looks like you're in a movie. I mean, it's so realistic looking. Yeah,
be like, night vision goggle is not 1080p.
Right.
They don't make 4K night vision goggles.
And it's all grainy. You can see the little green dots and things like that. But the unfortunate problem is that in real life, when some guy shoots you through a wall 6 or 8 times, you don't just patch yourself up and keep going.
Yeah, you don't find that medical kit laying.
That's when you. That's right. Good. My health bar is full. No, you have to call your corpsman or your medic, and they have to come patch you up. Then you have to wait for a medevac for 2 hours, and then what they should make a video game about what happens after the military, and they should take the corpsman who's patching somebody up in a house in Afghanistan, and then follow them through their career years later when they're trying to come out of the military.
It's them sitting in a schoolroom learning the same exact things they just did over in Afghanistan over again.
Yeah, it's called Call of Duty: The Interview.
Yeah, or Call of Duty: The Post Service.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. I think we're onto something here.
There you go. Call of Duty veteran games. I don't know. Veteran life.
I always wanted to do a Cribs episode in the barracks at Camp Pendleton, because at the time we were living in, we called them the crack houses, and they were these old condemned buildings. They were old squad bays that were turned into rooms, and so there were 2 or 3 Marines to each room. There were bats in the ceiling, and I'm pretty sure we're all going to have illnesses later on from whatever was in those buildings.
Yeah.
But we always had the idea, we just never executed. We had the idea to do a Cribs episode, like come into the rain room where 8 dudes take a shower at once, and only one of the 6 toilets works. Yeah. And this urinal's always clogged up.
Yeah.
And like, check out how big my mirrors are,
Yeah. It's only got a crack here in the bottom left corner. Since you brought it up, I actually had a picture. Ideas. Yeah, I had a picture pulled up that was kind of based around the barracks. So here you go. It is a picture I pulled off the internet today. It says nobody, ... absolutely no one, ... barracks on Friday night. It is 3 young service members. One has a Captain America mask on. One has a panda mask on. The other one a horse mask. They are in their green silky shorts, some high socks. Looks like they got their canteen, some magazines. They are ready to go. If you've ever spent time in a barracks or around a barracks, you've probably seen some weird things. Maybe not going down, but just this would be weird to see. You look up on the 3rd floor, there's 3 guys standing there with masks on. But I'm telling you, these sort of things happen in the barracks all the time. I like when I would love. Go ahead.
I was going to say I would love to get like a thread going in Facebook or YouTube on this video and hear people's stories, and they can include pictures about what happened in the barracks.
Yeah, I had an idea years ago, and I'm not anywhere near Hollywood. I don't know any, movie writers, anything like that. But the movie Kids essentially was a movie about a group of young people in New York City over like a 24-hour period. I would like to do a raw movie of it starts at about 3 p.m. on a Friday. You get your introductions to your main characters out of the way of individuals from a platoon in the armed forces. And then, they get dismissed at 5 o'clock. And then you follow them until, Saturday at 3 p.m. and just the craziness that could possibly ensue.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of different avenues that thing could go down.
I as you were talking, I was looking up a couple of pictures that I have these shared inside of Facebook, but this is one of, we had Bart Cole on the show a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Bart Cole and myself back when I was skinny and in shape. But I don't think we were actually jamming out. I think we were just holding guitars and probably just making a ton of noise. And as you can see, there are some other guys in here too. Mm-hmm. So there were probably like 16 guys in a barracks room. I'm sure somebody was smoking cigarettes and they shouldn't have been. Mm-hmm. And then
possibly, we were past the that 7-year window where somebody can still get in trouble, but possibly maybe an underage drinking.
I probably was like 19 there.
Yeah.
Not that I was drinking. I don't drink at all. But that's, all kinds of nonsense and shenanigans. The officer of their day would come knock on the door and be like, you guys need to keep it down in here. We'd be like, yes, sir. And then 5 minutes later, we'd be back
doing it. Yeah.
And that was the nature of the beast. That's how it went.
Mm-hmm. I have a very similar photo, Matt. Me and one of my buddies, he was originally from LA. So every once in a while I'd go up, to his home, his family home over a weekend. And it's a picture. He has a guitar in his hands and I have a mic, and it looks like I'm just death metal screaming into this mic, and he looks like he's jamming out, and literally right in the background over my shoulder is his cousin who's just reading a book, not engaged in what it looks like. We could 100% be, doing some death metal in the living room. She's no selling it. So our last article I have pulled up here is right sizing the force. Army offers armor for smaller troops. Now, Matt and I kind of spoke a little bit before We went live today, and personally, when I joined the service, I thought, man, I'm joining the Marines. I'm going to be one of the small guys there. I'm just under 6 foot at the time going into boot camp. I think I weighed about 170 pounds. Coming out, I was 155. Yeah, if you're looking to lose some weight, go to boot camp. That'll help you out. But yeah, I got into the fleet and I realized, like, yeah, not everybody's 6'2", 250, nothing but, rocked up muscle. Most of us were 18 to 23, very thin, very well in shape. Like the picture you just showed, Matt, you were, not that you were, huge or anything now, but you were very thin there. And that's how most individuals were built. So I know personally the first few flak jackets I was issued, be it, combat school, engineer school, the first one in the fleet, they all seemed like they were just huge, big, and bulky. And I'm like, what monster used to wear this flak jacket? Because this don't fit me at all.
Yeah.
But this article talked about
this is the stuff that we got. Like I went in right before 9/11. You did too, I think, right? So so we were in right before 9/11. We were still using like the old Cold War era and like Vietnam era gear, and it was like basically like one size fits all. And here's your load bearing vest, your LBV, and it's a ragtag. Half of it doesn't work. That was always my biggest frustration. If we ever had to run with our gear on, I'm like, I feel like I'm running with a bunch of like loose fitting backpacks on. Like everything's just flopping around, and nothing was. And then after 9/11, suddenly the gear got good. We got new armor, and you could get fitted, or you could adjust the size of it and stuff like that.
Well, a common complaint from female soldiers and some small statured men who had been dealing with the bulky armor. We talked about how good the new armor was, and Matt, you said we had that old school Vietnam era stuff. So when that new stuff came out, we're like, this is great. And for me, the new flak jackets fit much better, things of that nature. But there are still individuals out there that these newer versions of the protective gear just didn't fit right, where individuals trying to get that weapon up on the shoulder, or like you said, they're out there on a hump, they got their gear on, and things are just sliding around because this gear is just too wide for them. So over the past 2 decades, the Army has been working on trying to create some new sizing for this gear. So essentially, they're starting out with the females and the smaller statured men. They've created some small shorts, small longs, things of that nature to help these individuals out. They're calling it the modular scalable vest. It's been distributed to about 4,500 soldiers so far in the 82nd Airborne down in Fort Bragg in North Carolina. The female soldiers were able to get the new versions of the combat shirts as well. They're tailored a little bit more to the female figure. But yeah, anybody that has been in the armed forces that has got issued gear that has been around for 20, 30, even longer plus years, most likely that gear doesn't fit extremely well. So it's good to see that they are trying to customize the gear a little bit more, make it more manageable for these individuals that have to wear it on a daily basis and use it, when the time comes. So.
Right. Yeah. And that's it's being comfortable in your own gear. And especially if you're going to be operating in combat, you want stuff to, or in a real world environment, you want stuff to be, you want it to fit, you want it to not be bouncing around on you. But I always thought it was really annoying when I watch promo videos on YouTube for the Army or the Marines, and you got people walking around with like helmets and hats that don't fit them, and they're all cocked sideways like they used to wear their hats back in like World War II. And you got people they just look really awkward, and that in and of itself. And one of the reasons I joined the Marines, for example, was because of the uniform. I was like, I want to wear that uniform. I want to look good in that uniform. That was one of the 68 reasons that got me to join. But when I see videos or pictures of people who look like they are swimming in their equipment, I just have to wonder like how many other people are turned off by that. Like, oh, the other branches uniforms look better, I'm going to go there. So everything's a recruiting tool.
I do have to say, welcome back to William Shatner. He becomes the oldest human in space after his Blue Origin flight today. Bezos sent Captain Kirk into space one last time, but the pod, the tip of the shuttle, we'll say, came back down successfully today, and William Shatner was on that flight. So congratulations, William Shatner. And I know we try to stay pretty apolitical, but Matt, have you seen the "Let's Go Brandon" memes on social media?
Yeah, and the shirts and
the
things
shirts,
like that. Yeah.
If anybody out there watching or listening doesn't know the "Let's Go Brandon" thing, just maybe Google that up. There was a NASCAR driver, whatever like the AAA for NASCAR is called.
Yeah.
I think it's the Xfinity Series. A young man by the name of Brandon won a race, and the story goes on from there. But you can check out the "Let's Go Brandon" comments if you're not aware. But
I've been asked about that like 6 times in the last 2 days because somebody would say it, and I just think it's kind of funny. The situation is funny.
Yes,
how it came about and how people are capitalizing off of it.
Yes, absolutely. There's a sports announcer misheard something, and she thought it was "Let's Go Brandon." So that's how the "Let's Go Brandon" thing became a thing. So
it's interesting. We're gonna have shirts and stuff now.
Yeah, it like you said, Matt. It's overall, it's not necessarily funny or amusing, but how it's all come to be is the wild part. It's
right.
It's a weird world we live in. That's for sure.
It is.
Yeah, but that's all the news we have for today. Matt, you got anything else before we get out of here?
No, just Veterans Day is coming up, so I mean we've got a little under a month now. Of course, the Marine Corps birthday is the day before on November 10th. But I always like
Marine Corps birthday, and then our day to recover, Veterans Day.
Right, that's exactly what it was. But it's for the people who want to participate in these different events. Start looking now. Go out and see what's going on. There might be parades nearby. There might be different ways to participate. I know that there are different organizations that have Facebook groups. Here in the end of October, the Irreverent Warriors group in Cincinnati is going to have a Silkies hike.
Oh, nice.
And so it's essentially, it brings light to, or it sheds light on different veteran issues by asking veterans and their friends and family to show up and do a Silkies hike. And so Silkies are the really short, silky shorts that people wear for PT, for physical training in the military. So you'll see a bunch of people walking down the street holding flags with combat boots on and Silkies.
And very tiny shorts.
It looks pretty silly in some cases, but it serves a purpose, and I know that they have a handful of those coming up. My brother is doing one in December down in Key West or something like that because he lives down in southern Florida. So
terrible place to be.
He asked me if I want to come down, and I'm like, man, I still got to think about this because I got to look at flight costs and stuff. Like, is it worth it to come down to do a Silky hike?
Yeah,
I don't know. Do I need to just get down to Florida? I mean, right.
Yes.
Yeah. Can this be a business expense?
Probably not.
But it's one of those things where we're approaching that date, and there are plenty of different events being hosted. So go out and look for something to participate in.
Yeah, the DAV, your local American Legion, VFWs, things of that nature, all should be doing something. Some to larger scales and smaller scales. But yeah, there's plenty of organizations out there. Local veterans, motorcycle clubs, things like that do rides around Veterans Day. Try to raise some money for other veteran organizations in the area. So yeah, just go out there, do a little bit of local research on your local community. I'm sure you'll find something being hosted for veterans in your area. So with that being said, thank you very much for checking us out and giving us an hour of your time. We appreciate it very much. You can check us out on all the major social media platforms as well as all the major podcast platforms. Give us a like, rating, review. Tell a friend, tell a family member, let them know about us, and we would appreciate that greatly. So until next time, we'll be right back here on Beyond the Wire.